Shook deep, he's got it. Wants that throw back. Not a shadow of a doubt.
Welcome to Summer Showcase this week. After a hiatus last week, I am here tonight with current Central European Football League quarterback of the Copenhagen Towers.
Yep.
Randy Schroeder, and former Stuttgart Surge quarterback of the ELF as well. Thanks again, Sam, for that awesome intro. There is a slight problem though. October has not happened yet in 2023, my man. So that last clip may need to be edited a little bit.
That was a sweet intro, though.
That was, yeah. Thanks, Sam, for laying that down here at the Shady Sports Network as well. For that too, Randy. Thank you so much for joining me, man. I know it's you're right smack dab in the middle of your season in the CEFL. Real quick, one of the first questions I'd love to ask all American imports playing overseas is, what's your story about how you ended up over there? Was it connections? Did it something you stumbled across, or how does that story come about?
Yeah, so kind of both. And thank you, Michael, for having me on. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, so I went to school at a small school. I went to a D2 school called Truman State University, and then I transferred to Ave Maria University, an AIA school in South Florida. And while I was there, one of my, now I call him a good friend, but Coach Jarvis McGarrah, he had coached in Italy. And, he told me in college, he's like, hey, if the NFL doesn't work out, you should try going to play in Europe. And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? Like soccer, And so he's like, no, there's leagues over there. It's a whole thing. I mean, then he started explaining how the import rules work, and you can only have a certain amount of Americans. Most teams will bring over an American quarterback. So that's how it started. My senior year, just started putting some film out to coaches over there and had some interest. A couple GFL2 teams out of college, some other ones, and then the Copenhagen Towers. And decided to go to Copenhagen and play. So that's kind of how I got into it. And now this is year 6, I think, for me. So it's a lifestyle now.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I mean, and you've been with Copenhagen for, or at least on and off here and there for a little bit. What, since 2019? So
yeah, 2018 was the first year, and then bounced around a little bit around Europe. Went to Germany, went to Czech Republic. But Germany was 2020, COVID. That season got canceled. Everything in Europe kind of got wrecked with that, because the way they do their season over there is spring, summer, early fall. And that was right when COVID was happening. I remember we had a scrimmage in March, and everything shut down that exact same week. So, but then played with the Towers in 2021. Had the chance to go play in the ELF in 2022. So, took that, and then now I'm back in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen really has been like our second home. I mean, those people are awesome, and we had some opportunities to go elsewhere, and it's just, at this point in my career, the family aspect, the friends aspect, the familiarity aspect was so important to us, and we have a good community in Copenhagen, and it's a great place to live.
Yeah, and you've had tons of success. I mean, there's is there Super Bowl called the Mermaid Bowl? Is that the Super Bowl? That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. You got a couple of championships. What are they? They're going you guys are trying for 3 in a row this year, right?
Yep, 3 in a row. Yep. Hopefully we can three-peat this year. Is that true? Wait. Yeah, repeat.
Yeah, 21, 22, and 23, right? It'd be a three-peat, right?
Yeah. That's true. Yep. So we're going for a three-peat. It's been awesome being a part of such a good organization. Like they really take care of the players well. They take care of the imports well, and on top of that, it's fun winning. and that kind of starts from the top down. They've created a good culture over there, so it's fun to be a part of.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love hearing success stories like that, and all that stuff as far as that's concerned. You're right smack dab in the middle of your season right now, right? You guys are 5-0. You told me earlier today.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little weird how they do their season in Denmark. So we're actually on break. I'm in the States right now for a couple weeks.
Oh, okay, sweet.
They essentially have um, the best way I equate it is like a MLB All-Star break or something where
Oh,
they'll go on hiatus for a little bit. So all the local guys that get invited to go play on the national team, that starts up this week. So they'll go to practice, they'll go to like a camp, and then I believe they play Serbia next weekend. So it's kind of interesting how they do it. So we get a break. Americans can't participate in that. So I usually come home
yep.
for a couple weeks, see family, work out. So it's good.
What state? I gotta ask. What state are you in?
Yeah, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina right now.
Oh, North Carolina. Okay, I
Yeah.
got a good friend who lives down in Durham
It
area.
was it was like 97 degrees today.
Yeah.
So,
That's up here tomorrow.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
it's supposed to be like 97 tomorrow. Up here in Maine, we actually do get the heat often. It's unbearable for once you get more north. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh my god, it's so worse." And I'm literally just like, we have 8 months of winter.
right.
Let's just shut up about this, please.
I didn't even know it got that hot up there, but I knew it got freezing cold. So I'd rather take 97 a couple days in the summer and then, in the late fall and winter, you're still in the 50s, 60s.
Even being a big dude, man, I would much rather take the heat over the cold
Yeah.
any day of the week.
Oh yeah.
It's for sure. I do have to ask because I know that first I had trouble trying to find out how many games for Stuttgart did you play? Did you play the whole season last year for them, or
Played 4 games.
you played
Yeah,
4 games for
played the
them?
first
Okay.
4 games. I don't know how much of that do you wanna get into? I'm happy to dive in more.
Well,
Um,
I wasn't sure. I couldn't. For some reason I was struggling finding any correlation to how many games you played with them. I did not
yeah.
know the. I know that they didn't win a game last year. I know that they had some some uphill battles to fight for sure. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean, if you want to dive into it, you're more than welcome, Randy. I was going to ask how it was coming from, Copenhagen, where you had won a couple championships and had some winning, seasons. Maybe not necessarily from a franchise standpoint, but like, and then going obviously to a team that was struggling to win. Like, how was the differences there as far as at least on the football front?
Yeah, first of all, it was exciting just because the ELF was the new big thing in Europe, and it still is. And I want to see it be successful. It was a really cool experience. Had the opportunity to go play for the Surge, and so I had to take it. I felt like just to get that experience, I mean, it's kind of the highest you can get in Europe, in my opinion. Um, you're just playing the best teams. So
Mhm.
you were mentioning the CEFL, yeah, like the Towers usually compete in that every year. Those are good teams as well. All those teams could probably be in the ELF too. But the ELF truly is, for the most part, the best of the best. So that was exciting to get to be a part of that. Um, the Surge, there, I've made some good friends there, and really, when I look back on it, I'm really happy for the experience. Some really good things came out of it, but it was last year. I mean, I don't know how else to put it than it was a dumpster fire. So it was an absolute mess. One of our good friends, Marius Fischer, he's a videographer in Germany. He's a German videographer, and he's coming out with a docu series on last year, actually. So
Oh,
um,
okay.
I've seen some clips. It looks really good. So if whenever that comes out, I'm plugging his show. But it does document the last season very well, and the if you want some drama and dysfunction, um, go watch it. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of it wasn't a good, it wasn't a good year for the organization.
Mm,
I think they had won 2 games the year before, 1 or 2 games. We started off 0-4. We were in a couple games. We lost to Warclaw by 3 points. Week 2, we go up in Vienna, who won a championship that year, and
mm.
we're tied with them in the second quarter. We're down by a touchdown in the third quarter, and then the wheels just fall off. Um, I end up getting cut after week 4, and then the head coach gets fired after week 6,
Oh man.
and they proceeded to not win a game. And I think on offense after I left, I want to say I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out here, but I think they averaged maybe a touchdown a game. So it was just it was a rough year. So it's good for all those guys that I know that are still on the team. I'm so happy to see like Jordan Newman's there.
Yep.
He's a legend in Europe as far as head coaches. And to see how he's turned that program around. I mean, it's easy to look at them now, and I believe they're 6-2, or close to somewhere around that. But to see them winning games, like
Yeah.
it's awesome to see. I'm happy for those guys.
Yeah, I remember watching a little bit because I caught the tail end of the season last year. I didn't get come across it until like, June, July or whatever, and it was almost seemed like every game for Stuttgart was like 47-3 or 47-0, and it was just and I get that, the with import rules now that I've studied this a little bit further and stuff. It's not just like every team is an influx of American, Canadian, or I don't want to disrespect anybody, but like the guys that we know that play D1 over here in America that are on these teams, like they have rules for, and to me, I think the rules are good because I think it helps, build the American football, brand and in the areas that they're in. So I don't have any issues with that. It's just you start looking at the homegrown talents and you're like, what's the level of competition in that area type stuff. Now we know we talked a little bit that the Germans, Germany, Austria, um, the American football culture is starting to grow and spiral out in Europe as well. So a lot of these countries are starting to really get a little further into it as well. So I think it was bound to happen. I mean, we're kind of seeing it a little bit this year with some of the expansion teams as well, and
Right.
At the ELF level, anyways. So I am a firm believer that everything will level out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, look at a team like Stuttgart. I mean,
Right?
we were dead last year, and now they're in the playoff hunt. So, it all varies, and really any team can beat anybody at any given week. So, I mean, it's still, as far as leagues go in Europe, it's probably still the most competitive as far as just the talent. So that's why I think it's growing in popularity, especially the ELF. Just they do have a little bit of parity, and I know there's been complaints about, some teams are getting blown out, like you said, the expansion teams, but give it a little bit of time, you know, give it a little bit of time. So
Well, I mean, just take a look at Helvetic. I
yeah,
mean, they struggled and now they're on a 3-game win streak with Sky Noble coming in, but that defense has been absolutely fantastic. Actually, I think they were one of the teams I think they were the first team to beat Stuttgart. So
yeah, yep,
in a
and
pretty impressive fashion too.
and last year, I remember Barcelona was one of the best teams in the league. I think they were second or third in seeding in the playoffs. And last year, there were only 4 teams that got in. They lost to Istanbul halfway through the year. The
Yeah,
Istanbul Rams, who don't even exist anymore, aren't in the ELF anymore. So, and I think they won 1 game. So, it's just, yeah, give it some time,
yeah.
and it really is any given Saturday or Sunday.
And I'm a firm believer too that a league like the ELF is also good for other leagues that have been around probably longer than the ELF overall. Whether it's the Central, European League of Football League, or the German Football League or the Austrian Football League, because with the way that the ELF presents itself, it does bring in eyes.
Yep.
And I think that the success for that league does help I don't want to say smaller leagues, but maybe more of the smaller leagues with longevity. Is that how you feel as well, or is that the overall consensus over there for the most part?
That's how I feel. There's some there's some people in Europe that, the traditionalists, that aren't very happy with the ELF, but I mean, in my opinion, it helps everybody, right?
Right.
It's getting eyes to American football in Europe, and that I fail to see where that's a bad thing, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, they're uprooting some of the traditions. They're taking players from other places, but mean, it's also a recruiting tool for some of these teams now. Like, hey, we had 3 players go to the ELF. Like
Mm,
that's how we develop our players well. It's kind of all how you kind of all perspective. But I
yeah.
personally think it's a great thing for the league. I think it's where Europe is going. Are you familiar with kind of how the club structure works over there or any of that? Because that's where it's really different.
So I know that the ELF doesn't have. I know that a lot of that is individual ownership, similar to how the NFL is. There's just no revenue sharing in the league is concerned. I don't know how that correlates to the other leagues just yet, because like I said earlier, I am in the process of still learning a lot of this stuff. But I have a good football mind, so I've learned a good chunk of it so far. But that's basically about the what I know right now as far as the structure is concerned for the league.
That's why there's just why there's a little bit of dissent from people is because the old structure used to be and the current structure for a lot of teams, they're all clubs essentially. So
Right.
everyone pays player dues, your imports don't, and then maybe you have a big team that pays a lot of players because they have sponsorships and they have eyes and they have a fan base. The ELF kind of said, let's take that a step further, right? Like you said, and really develop a franchise model where we have individual owners, no player dues, and you actually have to pay all your players. And I
Mm,
know that sounds crazy, like to an American, it sounded crazy to me,
right.
but that's just how it works over there. And so they did change that, which I love. Like I hate playing next to guys that I look at. I'm like they should be getting paid, and they're not,
Right.
right? And I am. So
Mm,
I loved being in the ELF where everybody was getting paid to play. You know,
yeah. And it all starts somewhere too. I mean, it always takes someone to be a trailblazer of sorts and kind of uproot some traditional, thought process to be able to lay a new foundation for stuff and whatnot. The one thing that I do have to say that I've loved so far, and I haven't heard about it from every club, but a lot of the clubs, especially from the ELF level, have started being involved in the cities or towns that they are and bringing American football to youths over there,
yeah,
and really kind of developing a little bit of like a youth program to bring it, a homegrown, um, sport to, somebody that may not. And I mentioned this when I was talking to Connor, somebody that may not be able to play soccer. Like with my frame and how slow I am, I played goalie, and like even then it was like, I with the athletic as these goalies are, like I wasn't going to make it in soccer if I was in Europe. There's just no way in hell I would have been able to. You know what I mean? So
yep.
uh, it's good for youth, in my opinion, to do that. And have that program. I think.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, the Towers. So my team, the Copenhagen Towers, they do an awesome job of that. They always have. Um, they have a couple. So with the club structure, we have our my team was considered like the elite team. Then under it, you have the U19, U17, U14, U12. So they have a whole youth culture under
Oh,
this one
nice.
team. Teams like the Vienna Vikings are like that. Teams like the
Hmm.
Trio Raiders in the ELF, teams that have been around for a while, they have the same sort of structure. And it's just those are the clubs, in my opinion, that do the best, right? Because they're kind of growing from the ground up. And so that, like you mentioned, it's cool to see the ELF teams start to get involved in that. But in Europe in general, soccer's king,
Yeah, oh,
and
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
we try and preach to those guys. Like football is for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're 250 pounds and
Mm,
slower than dirt. Like there's a place for you on the team. You know, it doesn't matter if you're super small and quick. Like there's a place for you. If you can't throw or catch or block, maybe you can kick. And it's just, I know it seems like rudimentary to Americans, but like that's the type of stuff that I think that's why American football is growing over there.
yeah.
For
And,
every-
and and the NFL is going to help with that too. Obviously, coming over and kind of bringing eyes onto it. I mean, we see,
yeah.
the ticket sales going off the roof. So much over there. Whenever they have I think the Germany game with the Buccaneers last year was sold out in however many seconds, So
Yeah.
it's good to see that they're the NFL is at least trying to expand over there, and also the leagues that are over there are at least trying to kind of instill this like foundation to be able to help it grow, and whatnot. So the success of anything like the ELF is essential, I feel like, to keeping that momentum going. In my opinion, anyways. So
Yeah, I agree. I
I
agree.
I got to ask you, the CEFL. I'm assuming probably not. Is there any way to? Do you guys have any way that you can stream the games, or is it literally just follow the socials and hope for the best? I mean, is there a
No,
streaming thing?
those games are usually streamed.
Okay, all
Um,
right.
yeah, so the CEFL, how that works, it's a little different, and I'm gonna really confuse everybody now. But um, so the CEFL, in order to qualify for the CEFL, and unless it's changed in the last couple years, but to my understanding, you have to win your national championship
Okay.
or be runner up. If you do either of those things, then you can qualify for the CEFL. Think of the CEFL as more of like a tournament. So like we play our CEFL games in the middle of our season. It's really how like soccer works over in Europe.
Okay, all right.
Like you'll have a Euro Cup right in the middle of your soccer season. So that's how the CEFL is structured. So the CEFL for 2023 is over. That championship was in June. So I believe. Um, and then now everybody else that competed in the CFL is just playing out the rest of their national season.
Oh, okay. All right. I see. So
Yeah.
a little bit confusing for probably would take me a little bit to
Right.
kind of dive in there as far as like overall, but I think I got the gist of it. So
Yeah.
for sure.
It's a lot of moving pieces.
Your website was very helpful, by the way, with a lot of this stuff for me too. By the way, I want to give you a little shameless plug here for your website because it really kind of opened my eyes to some stuff for sure. So
Well, don't thank me. My dad is a digital marketing. He has his own digital marketing small business and Encompass advertising agency. And he one day was like, you really need a website. I'll make the template and I'll throw some things in there. And he kind of built it, and then I went in and put some things in. I try and keep it updated. So I'm glad it was helpful. I appreciate you shouting that out.
well, no problem at all. I'll shout out your dad too. Thank you, Randy's dad, for that. You can let him know some random just said, thanks for the website.
He'll appreciate that. He'll
No
appreciate that.
doubt. I did see that you had a couple game-winning drives there. One in the Mermaid Bowl, two in the Mermaid Bowl. You had two back-to-back in the Mermaid Bowl.
One in the Mermaid Bowl, one in that CFL, one of the CFL final games.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So yeah, those were exciting.
Yeah.
I think if you could win every game 40-0, that's great. But that's not how it happens often. And so that was actually those were both in the same year. So if you can think
Oh, even
about
better.
like how I mentioned the CFL is kind of the first half of our season, intermittent in between our other games. Like that was one of the CFL finals, and then later that season we played the Mermaid Bowl championship, which was also a nail biter. But yeah, cool games to be a part of for sure.
When I was reading it, I was just picturing like the Joe Montana drive against Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl, like how Joe came into the huddle. I was just picturing like you were just walking in and just being like, "Hey, you know, I like tacos" or something, and just keeping your guys at ease or whatever. I feel like every quarterback has that same like kind of swagger to them,
Yeah.
so that's the reason why I always go back to that.
Well, I think you have to, right? I mean, if you go into the cuddle like freaking out, I mean, guys aren't gonna really believe in, even if I think you have to believe in yourself first before anybody else is gonna follow. I do remember the CFL, one of the CFL final games. Before that drive, I remember the coach just looking like it was a back and forth, and they score. We get the ball back with about minute 30 or so left, and I just remember looking at him, and he kind of just didn't know. I mean, it was a lot, and he's a heck of a coach. But he just in that moment, I think, was a little bit like, "What's going on?" And I remember just looking at him. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna win this game, and we just ran out on the field and drove right back down, and it all worked out. So yeah, there's always some story behind those 2-minute drives, but good memories.
So I do want to ask this one. This is a tough question to ask because it's a little painful. It's a little painful for me. But with all the stuff that's all the stories, and I mean, obviously none of it has necessarily been verified per se. But with a lot of the rumors swirling as far as the ELF and being in rough shape, I guess is the word I'll use as far as it's concerned. What's the overall state of American football in Europe in general? Or what is your feeling behind it? Because as an American who just got into it and trying to bring attention to it, I know that they're in their 3-year window, so they're gonna have some rough spots. It's gonna be up and down. I mean, it happens all the time, but uh, is it considered alarming amongst players over there, or is it just kind of like it's a new business? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So when I got into Europe in 2018, and now being 2023, it has. I just feel like American football has grown tremendously over there. Even just people that you would go over there and people had never heard of it. Like, what is that? Is that rugby? Like that's what you'd always get. And now that doesn't really happen. I mean, everybody knows what American football is, and let's be honest, the NFL is going to go where the money is, right? And there's
Oh,
a
yes.
reason why. There's a reason they're playing almost a full season in London and now playing 2 games in Germany, regular season games. So they go where the money is and where the interest is. Interest has definitely grown just in the last 6 years that I've been there. The ELF kind of sprung up out of that. Patrick Azuma, the commissioner, was involved. So how it works in all the countries there is most countries will have essentially what would be like our ESPN or something show the American football games, and they don't have commercials because soccer you go 45 minutes, right? Halftime 45 minutes. There's not a commercial in between drives every 2 minutes like there is in the States. So it cuts to the studio where it's German broadcasters or Danish broadcasters just talking about the last drive or the game. Patrick Azuma was one of those guys, and he's the commissioner now. So he kind of grew this following of American football in Germany and throughout Europe. That's where the ELF kind of sprung from. It was kind of his brainchild. And that was 3 years ago. So he got a bunch of teams on board. I think to see the growth and the explosion of just popularity for the ELF has been great. I think, like you were alluding to, I think seeing a couple teams be in financial trouble this year has been a little bit alarming. But I do think the Leipzig Kings, when I was in the ELF last year, there was talk of them folding last year. I think that them doing it in the middle of the season wasn't a great look. If they, that's never good. And then the Prague Lions, but the Prague Lions are a new team. So, and then Istanbul, which is in Turkey, and Turkey's had some economic troubles the last couple years. So that didn't really come as a surprise to anybody. So I think as far as like the staples of the league, the Rhine Fire, some of the teams like that have the Vienna Vikings, teams that have a huge fan base, I don't think there's any concern that they're not going to be able to pay their bills or anything like that. I think where the concern is did the league expand too quickly?
Yeah.
And that's yet to be seen. But I think there is a little bit of uneasiness because last year and the first year and the last year, the ELF didn't really have any of those issues besides Istanbul. And so this is kind of the first, like, how is the league going to handle a little bit of adversity? And I mean, we'll see. But I just know generally throughout Europe, there's more teams that want to join the ELF that are raising funds. There's the interest in the ELF is still there. So
yeah.
I feel good about it, but I also think that being a new league, a couple mistakes and the league folds, unfortunately, and it's never worked out in Europe. NFL Europe left. There was another kind of attempt to do something close to the ELF that ended up folding. So hopefully this one sticks.
Yeah, and for me, the way that from what I know or from what I've heard or understand, looking back at the history of any of the leagues, it's easy to take a look at some of these leagues and go, hey, NFL, and compare it to the NFL. But the NFL has been around forever. And from what I have heard and from what I have learned, that it was something along the lines of, it was actually on a show recently. It was aired on the Shady Sports Network that a guy mentioned that it was like 44 franchises inside the first like 20 years of the NFL came and gone. Like they went and, so it's not something that's uncommon. I mean, we know that football's not cheap by any means and stress of the imagination either. So I know that Leipzig isn't really at the fault of the new ownership. I know there was some stuff from the old ownership that kind of spilt over. Prague honestly seemed to be more of like a what's the word I'm looking for? Football conditions more than it necessarily did the money side, with some money side obviously having some issues as well. But I'm glad that Prague is back, and I'm glad that they're going to finish out the year at least, so we can at least hopefully maybe have that franchise kind of turn themselves around a little bit. So Randy, I don't have anything else. I just wanted to get kind of your feel. You've been over there for a little while on that and your thought process. Is there any shout outs, anybody you want to give a quick holler out to and whatnot, or any other final thoughts on anything?
No, I mean, I really appreciate you bringing me on, and I think it's awesome what you guys are doing, shedding light on European football. I mean, like I said, when I'm over here back in the States, people are like, you play soccer, right? So and maybe that's just because I'm my small frame, but I appreciate that you guys are covering it. I think that's awesome. And then if you guys want to follow the Copenhagen Towers throughout the rest of the season, we got a three-peat, like I said. It's going to be hard. There's some good teams in that league that we got to go through. And so shout out to my wife, who's doing a lot of the social media work for that team to keep everybody updated. So but no, I really appreciate your time, Michael.
Yeah, man. And what's funny is when I dove into this, I almost didn't do this show. This was literally a kind of a situation where we have somebody that does the network with us who's been kind of like killing it as far as interviews and stuff are concerned. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a show and maybe I can connect, here and there. Like my first like 3 shows were just me just rambling for a half hour, like trying to cover games and stuff. And eventually I just kind of started making some connections. And I'm a fan of football in general. So, diving into leagues like this, like you appreciate me bringing you on, but I appreciate you taking time out and coming on to at least help with the spreading of it. Because to me, I don't think there's a better game in the world, and that's no disrespect to soccer by any means. I still follow soccer, I still watch soccer, but I love football in general, and if I can bring it, like there's talent. Everybody looks at just one league and say, oh, well, it's not that league. And it's like, you know what, though? There is talent everywhere. So I appreciate you probably more than you know. So I, again, appreciate you and everybody else that's ever been on the show for coming on, man. And good luck to you for the rest of the way, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me, Michael.
Not a problem at all. I'm just running a quick outro here at Shady Sports. Until next week, thank you.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.